Good game. Drive safe. That session didn't go at all the way I expected, and not in a good way either. My improv was strong, the players seemed engaged, but something was just off. And if I'm honest with myself, I think I know what it was. I procrastinated on my prep and didn't spend enough time on it. Or maybe I prepped the wrong thing? My players did completely bypass my hairy banshee. Ending a game on that feeling sucks, but I think it is fixable, and avoiding it is figure-outable. Come on. I do my best as a GM, and if you're watching this, I expect you do too, but the game doesn't always go perfectly. This hobby is a craft, and it's only through a lot of trial and error that I've gotten better at it. This video is to share what I've learned about an approach to prep that avoids problems, but it can't fix everything, like player conflict, for example. I'll try to slay that monster in a future video. By the way, hi, I'm Grant, and this place is Mossy Antler, where we find meaning in our games. When we run the game, we are used to thinking critically and creatively, but like a goblin stalking a wayward hero, ready to poke its pointy spear in the guts of the hero. Sure, that works. We want to apply that same type of sharp, probing thinking to our prep. I alluded a little bit to what we might prep in my last video, and if the internet has completely fried your attention span, you can jump ahead to that what section in this video, but true understanding only happens when we ask the whys. Don't worry, we'll get to the what in a bit, and if you're in a prep emergency, I've made a whole separate video for that. You can check it out on my channel or the link below. But I want to ask, why are you prepping at all? And I think the most obvious answer is, so there's stuff to do in my game, but that's not what I mean. I'm talking about that deeper soul anchor. Why are we doing this? Why do we put actually quite a bit of effort into a game? Possibly more than other people do with their hobbies. I don't know, actually, that might be not true because there are lots of kinds of nerds out there. I promise this is important for our prep. So let me rephrase. Why are we playing these games at all?
It's like a reward.
It's for us as GMs to express ourselves creatively, to show off and share. It's for others, that is, our players, to have them have a fun experience and let them also creatively express themselves. And it's for the game itself. There is a kind of magic that happens around the table, virtual or physical. We want to see how the story unfolds through play with our friends. My theory and I guess conclusion is that if we know why we're doing it, why we're prepping, that will tell us what to prep. And it helps us avoid prepping the wrong things. But not every prep answer is going to be solved by knowing why you're doing it. Okay, so we've got our why, we've got our motivator, but what if you procrastinate prep? Or if players circumvent everything you've been prepping? What if you have a recurring nightmare where your players are showing up to play and you haven't prepared anything and you're in your underwear? I mean, I can't help you with that. The other two questions though, we can try that. Yeah. Once again, I find myself asking a why question. Why is prep ever difficult? At least for me, I think an answer is largely because I don't know what to be working on next when there are an endless number of things to be thinking about. The world, factions, NPCs, monsters, the PCs, maps, handouts, puzzles, the rules. That's not even half of it. That's not even close. If we aren't clear about what we're going to prep, of course we're going to procrastinate. Of course we're going to put things in the game that aren't relevant or that the PCs never engage with. So it's easy to go down a rabbit hole and get distracted. It can be difficult just from that. But because of that, we stay on course when our prep follows from what we want to see in the game. Speaking of GM woes, if you want to get help from me with your games, if you want to read my recent game sessions or get some extra videos from me, you can check out my Patreon. It would mean a lot if you did. Okay, what to prep? This is, of course, a homunculus.
Homunculus. It's Latin for little man.
of other GM advice that I've read. Special shout out to Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, and like I said at the top, trial and error. What I prep is going to be slightly different than what you prep. That should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. You and I are bound to care about different things. We're going to have different styles. Watch my GM styles video at the end of this. There'll be a link. But it can't hurt to try my approach, even if it's just for one session. I bet you discover something useful. Regardless, you're a game master. You are used to adapting things and changing things to your whims. You should do that here. These things are not in a particular order. Start with what you're inspired by leading up to the session. I know I do. I use Obsidian for my notes, but I've made my template-y guide thing in Obsidian, Google Docs, Notion. So the point of the guide isn't to go through it every time in painstaking detail. It's not prescriptive. It's more like a guideline.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
The point is to have direction, have something where you don't have to keep it in your head and rely on your memory. I know, at least for me, that's when things slip through the cracks. The first one is pretty straightforward. Review any notes from the previous session. Hopefully you took good notes last session. I am lucky in that I have some great note-taker players, so when mine aren't good enough, I can look at theirs. You're going to ask and write down the answers for, are there any loose ends that need to get wrapped up? Is there anything that should show up in the session? Did the players tell me any of their goals or hopes for this coming session? It's always my temptation to keep this stuff in my head, but there's something about writing it down that will make it stick, and from experience, your game will be better for it. Slight tangent, if you can remember at the end of a session to ask your players what their goals are for the next session, it can make a huge difference. And I also really love this idea called stars and wishes, where you go around to each player at the table and you ask them, stars, what are the highlights of the session? And wishes, what do you wish you would have seen or hope to see in the upcoming game? By the way, I would love to know what your stars and wishes are for this video, if you want to let me know in the comments. But back to prep. Reviewing the PCs is next. You go through each player character and you ask, what are they trying to do? What do they want? How can I bring their background into play? Or give them a callback from a previous session, also really good. What does the player of this character enjoy? Can I highlight them this session? And last, and probably most importantly, how can I give them interesting decisions? That last question is key because it frames our thinking. If we go back to why we're doing this, giving the players interesting decisions will answer that why. Next up is review or create NPCs. Now, some folks might find it a bit odd that this is so high on the list. Oh, hey Brian. This is Brian, a good friend of mine who also GMs. We disagree a lot, and it's a good thing. And he thinks this section isn't as relevant as I do. He would probably put this differently, but he wraps up NPCs and hidden information into locations. Thanks for your help, Brian. You can go back to Ravenloft Land or from wherever you hail. If you want to create an engaging and realistic world for your PCs to experience, thinking about NPCs should be a focus of your prep. After all, the meaning of life is other people. Okay, so for reviewing your PCs, you ask which PCs are relevant for this session, what do they want, like what are their goals specifically in regards to their fears and desires, but we'll get to that in a minute. How have they made progress towards their goals, and how do they plan on making progress towards their goals? Basically, what do they plan on doing and why? For creating NPCs, which lots of people have covered in lots of ways, and I probably will in a future video too, you want to ask, what is their one distinguishing trait or voice, if you do fancy voices? What is their main desire or fear, and how does it show up in how they behave? Do they have any secrets? And then one conflicting character aspect. These are unexpected things, like if it's an archmage, the archmage really enjoys cleaning things by hand without magic. If it's a thief, they're stealing to care for their sick mother. If it's a guard captain, they are caring for their sick mother. Basically, give your NPCs sick mothers to care for. Making sure that each NPC has a main desire or fear will do a lot for filling them out and making them feel real. And then making sure that they have one distinct physical trait or voice, and one conflicting character aspect will make them memorable. I'm sure we'll talk more about NPCs in a future video, so subscribe if you want to stick around to see that. Next up is create one evocative moment. I know I do this all the time, and you probably do too. You know, the thing that you've been thinking about that leading up to this session, you should probably put that in your game. Try to put it at the beginning to create a hot start if you can. If you put it in the middle or the end, you're just going to have to adapt to player shenanigans more, which might be fine depending on what your evocative moment is. But try to avoid, in general, a slow start like a shopping session or wandering around without clear goals, or resting, stuff like that. You try to do that stuff between sessions or at the end of a game. The evocative moment should set the stage or set the tone for the session. You want it to bring texture and life to your world. Try to get to the action and play out the exciting bit or the drama as soon as you can.
Orcs attack.
If at this point you feel like this is a lot to remember, that's what my template is for. The key thing about your evocative moment is that it creates an obstacle. But we'll get to obstacles in a minute. Before that, outline potential scenes. Make an outline, doesn't need to be fancy. Make some bullet points, don't get too attached to a particular scene, or more importantly, the outcome of that scene. Scenes don't always have to happen in a particular order, but they could. Sometimes it's nice to leave them flexible, and try to make one scene for about every 30 or 45 minutes of play. At least, that's what I do. The purpose of outlining scenes is to make you feel prepared, not necessarily to have an answer to everything that might happen. When you have a basic framework or structure to jump off of, your improv is going to be a lot stronger. For each scene, look for the ins and outs of a scene. How might it start? How might it end? So a scene has setup, that's like you're telling the players the description of what's going on, tension, which is the obstacles that are in the way, and payoff, some kind of resolution where they overcome the obstacles or there's some consequence to the obstacles. By the way, if you're enjoying this, leave a like. That would be really cool. Next, create relevant obstacles. Obstacles are things that have stakes, that is a threat of failure, and consequences, what happens afterward. And consequences could be positive or negative. Trust your instincts. What would be fun? What would challenge the players? Do that. If it helps, give your PCs imperatives or goals that drive behavior with strong verbs. Kill, stop, steal, protect, save, destroy, convince, and then there's another one. Escape. Did I get them all? I think I got them all. Other weaker verbs like chase, find, or question should be secondary to the above list. And the distinction here is the verbs should give an emotional direction. I've made an obstacle list, link below, that you can check out if you need even more ideas. Next is create the locations. Scenes that have obstacles happen at places. If you're running dry in the mental juice department, go look for maps or art, Google Images, Pinterest, ArtStation. You're looking for something that inspires you. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to get, the juices flowing. I don't know why I keep coming back to that. I probably shouldn't, but we're here now. And then I love this idea. Describe your scenes with ease. First E is environment. That's people, plants, objects, structures, the lighting, weather. A is for atmosphere, so that's like what is felt. You want to evoke emotions, positive or negative or a mixture. As for senses, smell, sight, touch, hearing, also temperature, movement. Is it clear or dull, fast or slow? The second E is events, so that's what's happening at the scene, what's happening at the location, or what may have happened recently. Next, review or create hidden information. So you're going to look at the clues, the secrets, the pieces of the story, the concepts that the PCs don't know yet. Can you tell I have a thesaurus? And you're going to just think about whether you want them to be in the session. The definition of a clue is a piece of information created by a person, place, or object, and it usually points to another person, place, or other piece of information. My guide has some more to say about clues. It has some more ideas, and I'm sure I will talk about them in a future video because I have many thoughts on them. So like I said earlier, there are other sources for bad games like player conflict, which I'll tackle at some point. Good prep does not solve every problem, but it can make your games a lot better if you're prepping the right things. That is it. If you like my shirt, you can get your own at mossyantler.com. Now go prep your next game. I know you need to. And remember, there's always a path forward. Now go find it. Once again, I find myself asking a why question. Why do any of this? No, that's not right.